Yeah, it's about time that we have to separate a little bit more and keep our own health priorities in line. So Rob has been working very hard to figure out a way for us to do the show from home. So
As the world was thrust into quarantine and isolation in March of 2020, so too were the students and faculty involved with Weather World. Good evening and welcome to this special remote edition of Weather World. For 4.5 months, we navigated uncharted waters, producing the show solely from our home offices while the outreach studios sat dark. Our limited, essential team would return to Penn State's University Park campus in mid-August of 2020, but the pandemic was far from over. We would deal with safety protocols, limited staffing, testing, and other impacts of COVID-19 throughout the entirety of the fall and spring semesters. Of course, Weather World was not alone. Students within Penn State's Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science also had to deal with this new normal.
There has definitely been some innovation because in the past several years, we haven't done many things remotely simply because even 10 years ago, the technology just didn't allow for it.
Campus Weather Service, the largest student-run forecasting organization in the country, has been around for nearly 50 years, but they've never encountered something like this. Not being able to meet in person directly impacted their ability to hold forecasting and communication shifts with their members.
It was definitely surreal at the time. Everything was kind of happening all at the same time, especially back in March of 2020. And so being president of a club, not really knowing how to act, what to do, what to tell the people who are involved in your organization was very difficult.
After a virtual ending to the spring semester in 2020 and uncertainty looming into the summer that followed, the students began to think outside the box.
And we assumed that everything would have to be virtual anyway, and that wound up being the case. We actually worked with the department to gain remote access to our graphics computers so that students could assemble their own shows, assemble all of the graphics in the order that they wanted to.
Getting everything set up for remote operations was no easy feat. It involves several new kinds of software for recording and remotely controlling graphic computers still on campus. The students faced several challenges, including compatibility with different computer operating systems and simply working with everyone spread out all over the country.
My challenge last year while I was head of IT for Campus Weather Service was trying to come up with basically a one-size-fits-all solution that I could essentially just email out to everyone and say, download these programs, use these files, and you should be good to go. It was a fantastic exercise in making something that would work for as many people as possible in as few steps as possible.
Students in Penn State's Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science also produced their own weekly weather magazine show called Weather or Not, which airs on local cable in Center County. Keeping the show up and running was an exercise in patience for everyone involved.
Someone's computer was glitching, wasn't running OBS properly. They couldn't export videos properly using Premiere Pro since we were doing it all on our personal computers and not the ones that are in the Walker building. So that was probably the most difficult. And then second to that was just not being able to see the people that you're working with on the show at all.
The weekly production, including editing, hosting, and forecasting, typically happens in the Walker building on campus on Wednesday nights. The pandemic changed all of that with no access to the studio under COVID safety guidelines.
In the past, I've had to be in the studio basically for that entire night on Wednesday. That really wouldn't have worked out for my schedule since I'm involved with student council and Thon through the College of EMS. So I was kind of fortunate that we were turning into more of a virtual aspect.
The students have embraced the changes that made Campus Weather Service and Weather or Not still possible, and they've learned a lot along the way.
They were glad that we were able to develop something that would allow them to continue doing what they enjoy doing with Campus Weather Service, especially those who are looking to go into broadcasting. Found it very valuable that they're still able to put forecast videos together so that they can develop their resume reel by the time they graduate.
Even though I'm not going into broadcasting, I still think that communicating the weather and being an effective communicator is very important regardless of what field. So I really think that's helped me become a better communicator, especially with the weather.
Out of tough times, innovations have changed the way student organizations and productions have operated, and some of those changes may be here to stay.
The fact that we could interview somebody for a feature that was across the country. We wouldn't have to worry about bringing a camera into the Walker Building or going to the National Weather Service in State College or driving down into Harrisburg and talking with FEMA and the emergency managers down there. So having that openness and that ability to kind of have, I guess, more creativity with what you're talking about in your weekly features, I feel like that will still stick around well into the future.
If someone's sick or whatever, being on Zoom would allow them to still be present for the shift, still be engaged in the forecasting discussion, and be a part of the forecasting process in real time. I have a strong suspicion that that will continue going forward.
Teamwork and technology have made the best out of an unfortunate situation for the students.
So much in the world of weather forecasting and weather communications takes place virtually. Now that we've, in essence, been forced to do that over the past 13 months now, we know that we can do it, and we have the ability to do that in the future. And I think that's something that we're not going to squander if given a chance.
For Weather World, I'm Rob Leidick.